All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and get started on number 4. So let me get my highlighter ready. So number 4 says Taylor Swift spent $95 to build her lemonade stand and sells lemonade for $5 per cup. Kanye West spent $40 to build his lemonade stand and sells lemonade for $4 a cup. After how many cups will Taylor have earned more than Kanye? All right, so let's go ahead and get started with Taylor Swift first. So it says that she spent $95, right? So if she spent money, that's a minus, a negative. So negative 95 to build her lemonade stand, and she sells lemonade for $5 per cup. So if she's selling lemonade, then that means she's adding. We don't know how many cups she's selling, so we're going to go ahead and put an X right there. Now, this is a part where we go back to our questions so that we can figure out what sign we're going to use. So after how many cups will Taylor Swift have earned more than Kanye? So that's the more than sign, right? So more than will be this way, like that. Now we can go ahead and do Kanye. So it says Kanye West spent $40, so minus 40 because he's losing money, to build his lemonade stand and sells lemonade for $4 per cup. So if he's selling lemonade, that is addition, and then we don't know how many cups he's selling, so that is a variable X. Now we're going to go ahead and solve for it. So we have to move all the x's or all the variables to one side and then all the numbers to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4x on both sides. This reduces to 0. So I get negative 95. 5x minus 4x, well, that is just positive 1x. My sign stays the same, and then I bring down my negative 40. Now I have to move that negative 95 to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and add 95 to both sides, and I get that 1x. The sign stays the same, and then negative 40 plus 95 is 45. So now I still have that 1, right? So I actually could leave the equation as it is, because the 1 is not going to make a difference, but I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So this is 1 times x, right? We're going to divide by 1 on both sides. 1 divided by 1, well, that's just 1. And then we keep the sign the same because we didn't divide by a negative. And then 45 divided by 1, well, that is just 45. So this is the same thing as how we had before over here. There is a 1 in front of this x. Okay, there's every time you see like a variable like that, and for example z, and there's nothing in front of it, there's always an invisible 1 there, just so that you know. All right, so that's it for that problem. All right, so number 5 says a pool has 40 cubic yards of water and is draining at a rate of 4 cubic yards per second. A second pool is empty and filling at a rate of 5 cubic yards per second. How many yards will the first pool have less water than the second? All right, so let's go ahead and start with the first pool. So it says it has 40 cubic yards. So that's the constant. That's how much it has, right? And it says that it's draining. So if it's draining, it's subtracting, it is losing. So we're going to subtract 4x because it says it's draining at a rate of 4 cubic yards per second. And we don't know how many seconds are going by. Now, we're going to go ahead and look at our question to figure out what sign we need to use for this problem. So in the question right here, it says, at how many seconds will the first pool, this is the first pool, right, have less water than the second? So that means that we're going to have less than, okay? That's going to be our sign, less than. And now let's work on the second pool. So it says a second pool is empty, so it has 0. And it's filling. So if it's filling, it's adding, right? At a rate of 5 cubic yards per second. So 5x, because we don't know how many seconds are going by. Now I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. 40 minus 4x. This stays as less than, and 0 plus 5x, well, that's just 5x. Now, since I already have my 5x on the right side and there's no other numbers to be moved besides that 5, I'm going to go ahead and move that negative 4x to the right side. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to add 4x here. This reduces to 0, and I'm left with 40 less than, because we didn't multiply or divide by a negative, so the sign stays the same. And then 5x plus 4x, well, that's just 9x. So now that I have my variables on one side and most of my numbers on the other side, I just need to move that 9 over, right? So that is 9 times x. So how do I undo multiplication? Well, by dividing, right? So I'm going to divide by 9 on both sides. This reduces to 1, and I'm left with 40 over 9 less than x. This is my final answer since I can't reduce any further. All right. So number 6 says Comcast charges a $95 startup fee. So let me get my highlighter ready. So 95 startup fee and $4 per week for internet. AT&T charges $40 startup fee and $5 per week for internet. At how many weeks is Comcast the same price or cheaper than? So that's a big keyword right there. That basically means less than or equal to, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start setting up my equation. I'm going to start off with Comcast. So they tell us that the startup fee is $95. So you pay those $95 no matter what, right? That is the constant. So then we have, and in addition to that, so plus $4 per week. We write X because we don't know how many weeks they're buying the internet for. So now I can go ahead and take a look at my question so that I see what sign I need to use. It says, at how many weeks is Comcast the same price or cheaper than? So like I said earlier, that basically translates to less than or equal to. Okay, so less than or equal to the other company, right, which is AT&T. So now let's do AT&T. So AT&T charges a $40 startup fee. So that is our constant, and $5 per week. So plus $5 per week, which is that X, because we don't know how many weeks they're buying the internet for. Now that I have my equation set up, I can go ahead and start moving my variables and numbers around. So I'm going to go ahead and move my 5x to both sides, and then I'm going to rewrite it. So 95, 4x minus 5x, well, that is negative 1x. My sign stays the same, and then I bring down my 40. So now that I have all my variables on the left side, I need to get all my numbers to the right side. So I'm going to start by moving that 95. So that is a positive 95. So I do the opposite, which is a negative 95. And I do it to both sides. So then I'm left with negative 1x. And my sign stays the same because I haven't multiplied or divided by a negative. And then 40 minus 95, well, that is just negative 55. Now I can go ahead and get rid of that negative 1 on the left side. So that is negative 1 times x. How do I undo a multiplication? Well, that is by dividing. So I'm going to divide by negative 1 on both sides. And this reduces to 1. And I'm left with x. Now, we divided by a negative. So what happens to the sign? It flips. So then negative 55 divided by negative 1, well, that is just positive 55. That is my final answer. All right, so for number 7, it says Nicki Minaj's bank account has a negative balance of $95, so she deposits $5 per day. Kelly Clarkson's bank account has a negative balance of $40, so she deposits $4 per day. How many days will Nicki's bank account have at least as much money as Kelly's? All right, so for this one, we're going to go ahead and start with Nicki Minaj. So she has a negative balance of $95, right? That is a constant. That is not changed. And so she deposits $5 per day. If she's depositing money, that means she's adding money to her bank account. So we have 5x because we don't know how many days she's depositing that money. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our questions so that we know what our sign is going to be. It says, at how many days will Nikki's bank account have at least as much money as Kelly's? Well, that means that it can't have less than, so it has to have greater than or equal to. Okay, so greater than or equal to is our sign here. And so now let's go ahead and do Kelly Clarkson's bank account. So she has a negative balance of $40. That is a constant. And she deposits, so she's adding money to her bank account. She deposits $4 per day. So that is our X because we don't know how many days she's going, right? So now we can go ahead and move everything over. We're going to move this 4X to this side. This reduces to 0, and I'm left with negative 95. 5x minus 4x, well, that's just positive 1x. The sign stays the same, and I move down my 40, or negative 40. So now I can go ahead and move the numbers to the right side since all of my variables are on the left side. So I'm going to go ahead and add 95 because I'm doing the opposite of this negative 95. And this reduces to 0. And I add 95 over here. So then I'm left with 1x greater than or equal to positive 55. So I can divide by the 1 here and here. But like I mentioned earlier, whenever you do that, this reduces to 1. And I'm left with x. The sign stays the same. 55 divided by 1 is just 55. So these are technically the same. So you could have just left it like that, or you could have divided, but it's the same thing. Whatever you prefer. All right, so for this question, it says Pipple's sandcastle is 95 centimeters tall, but the wind is blowing away sand at a rate of 4 centimeters per minute. Florida's sandcastle is 40 centimeters tall, and he is adding more sand to it at a rate of 5 centimeters per minute. For how many minutes will Pipple's castle still be taller than Florida's? So let's go ahead and get started with Pitbull's. So his sandcastle is 95 centimeters tall. That is a constant, right? But the wind is blowing away. So if it's blowing away, that means that is subtracting. It is taking away. So minus, and he's taking away 4 centimeters per minute. 4 centimeters. We don't know how many minutes, so that is our X. Now let's go ahead and go to the question so that we can figure out what sign we're going to use. So it says, for how many minutes will Pitbull's castle still be taller than Florida's? So that means that when is Pitbull's castle going to be greater than Florida's? So it's going to be like this, greater than. Now let's go ahead and do Florida's. So his sandcastle is 40 centimeters tall. And he is adding more sand to it at a rate of 5 centimeters per minute. We don't know how many minutes, so we use X. Now we can go ahead and solve for X, all right? So we're going to subtract 5X here. This reduces to 0 and 5X here. And we're left with 95. Negative 4X minus 5X, well, that is negative 9X. The sign stays the same, and we bring down our 40. Now that we have all of our variables on one side, we need to get our numbers on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 95 here and subtract 95 here. And we're left with negative 9x. The sign stays the same because we haven't divided or multiplied by a negative. So 40 minus 95, well, that is negative 55. And we have to undo that negative 9. So that is negative 9 times x. How do we undo that? Well, we undo it by dividing. So negative 9 over here and negative 9 over here. This reduces to 1. And now what happens to my sign if I multiplied or divide? well, it's going to change to the other side. So then negative 55 divided by negative 9, well, that is just positive 55 over 9. And this is our answer.